Trap killers without a doubt are the worst archetype of killer in Dead by Daylight, and so trying to answer the question of what is the best trap killer is actually somewhat difficult. There are only 3 trap killers in Dead by Daylight, that being the Trapper, the Hag, and the Skull Merchant. If you want a bit of an explanation as to what a trap killer is, I would highly recommend watching Pixel Bush's video, Why Dead by Daylight Hates Trap Killers, to get more of an insight. But long story short, a trap killer is a character whose only power is to place an object which zones a survivor, and have the object work autonomously without the killer's active input. And with that being said, I've looked through a ton of community data and I've spent the better half of a week playing these 3 killers, and I've gotten a list which I'm pretty confident I can show who the best trap killer is. Starting with the worst of the 3, the Trapper. Now the Trapper is one of the original killers in Dead by Daylight, and his design is quite iconic. Trapper, despite having some nice buffs, is still considered to be the worst killer in DBD. It's quite apparent that his power solely consists of placing bear traps, versus killers that can now outperform him in every way. Despite this though, in my testing he didn't perform too horribly, having an average of 2.84 kills per match, and finishing with an average of 3.53 generators completed by the survivors. Where the Trapper does shine more than the other trap killers are his really good add-ons. Trapper's add-ons are actually so good in comparison to some of the other killers in just any tier. The value you get from any purple or iridescent add-on really can make the difference in a match. A great example of this would be this match on Borgo. I was running Bloody Coil and Honing Stone. Now the Bloody Coil add-on will injure survivors that disarm any of my open bear traps, and Honing Stone will down any survivors instead of injuring them if they try to escape from my trap. Thanks to this one trap on the edge of this tile and the Honing Stone add-on, I was able to completely change the outcome of this game, as I'm able to leave the trapped survivor and continue to chase someone else, which snowballed my pressure immensely. Look at the spread on these, by the way. Okay, we're gonna leave him. There's a Jake over here, like right here. We don't need to worry about picking him up because he's gonna go on the ground as soon as he escapes. Here we go. Oh, well, GG's. I think we just win. He just plot twisted. Alright, we need a hook while he's plot twisting. Well, literally one add-on of difference, by the way. He's just gonna run to try and find Hatch. Alright, buddy. Now let's talk about the bad in Trapper. Trapper is incredibly inconsistent with his power. Having survivors escape after one attempt of trying to free themselves is incredibly disheartening. But that's even if your power works half the time. Sometimes your traps can become desynced from the server, allowing survivors to pass straight through it whilst you cannot. So basically, the survivor's POV shows that there's no trap there at all. And believe it or not, Trapper gets countered by grass. Well, lack of grass. A lot of the newer maps don't come with enough places to hide your traps in plain sight, so to speak. And so for the most part, survivors are going to be able to find your traps and disarm them rather than unwillingly step into them. Our number 2 spot is going to be going to the Hag. Now the Hag on release had some insane perks available, including that of Hex Ruin, which is still quite a semi-meta perk to run. The Hag is an interesting killer because her ability to trap differs from the other trap killers, because when her trap is triggered, she gains the ability to teleport to it and injure the survivor. This ability basically enables her to camp hooks a lot easier. During my testing, she performed quite averagely across all categories, with an average of 2.9 kills per match and finishing with an average of 3.66 gens completed by the survivors. Now Hag's main strengths come from her ability to snowball unaware survivors and guarding hooked survivors from a distance. This playstyle is actually quite boring and not very fun for the survivor or the killer, but it's honestly the best way to play her. But in order to do this effectively, she does need a little help from some add-ons. Mainly the Dried Cicada add-on. Now this game here is going to be an example of how quickly a Hag can snowball a game, once you allow the free hits to happen and you don't give enough time to reset the team. And it's because of how quickly you can snowball, you can turn a very losable game into a very advantageous and or winning game very quickly. Too long. Sag. Okay. Okay. Back into the basement we go. Dude, don't please tell me that the anti-camp doesn't go off. Nice. Oh, Leon. What are we doing? We're kind of throwing here. Okay, GG's. Oh, you don't have dead hard. Okay. GG's. Oh my god. The stress levels were okay. The stress levels were okay. They were kind of ramping up, but they were kind of okay that game. And whilst Hag is able to do this and pressure the area with instant mobility, she is actually the slowest moving killer in the game and is almost impossible to use during chase, and it can be absolutely brutal, especially if you're using no perks or add-ons, which I did do. And this is why it almost forces you to play this more camping area denial playstyle, which everyone kind of hates. And also, without add-ons, her traps have a very generous trigger range, which can be abused by the survivors. What I'm basically saying here is that her traps will be able to be triggered from further away than you can actually swing and hit the survivor. And so what most survivors will do, well, they'll go close enough to the trap to trigger it and then run away, so that when you teleport to it, you are unable to reach them with an extended swing. And by some surprise, the best trap-based killer is the Skull Merchant, which is very odd to me. Skull Merchant on release was an absolute demon when it came to holding a 3-gen, even holding the best team in the world hostage in a custom game for close to an hour. But ever since then, she's been nerfed to the ground and been left in a very miserable state. But despite this, she still managed to perform better than the other trap killers on this list, being able to get an average of 3 kills per match and finishing each match with only 2.7 gens completed by the survivors. Now, what makes Skull Merchant different from the other trap killers is that the drone is more of an area denial tool which acts over a period of time rather than instantaneously. Whilst also playing the Skull Merchant, I was actually pretty surprised at how often I was able to double tap survivors with the 3rd claw trap stack. And this basically tells me that most survivors still have no clue how to play against the Skull Merchant. And even more surprising, out of the 3 trap killers, I actually found Skull Merchant to be more enjoyable to play, despite her terrible bugs. Switching the drone's scan direction whilst you're looping a survivor is actually incredibly satisfying, especially if you get a free injury from it. Now here's an example of how effective the Skull Merchant's drones can be in chase. Oh, I didn't get a scan there. That's kind of tragic. Nice. Got a free injure. Is he dead zoned here? No, he makes this pallet, unfortunately. Or does he? Not quite. Not quite, buddy. Pick up. While Skull Merchant was able to perform better than the other 2 trap killers, she is not without any issues. A very common bug is her drones becoming inactive through the floor, basically making them impossible to use when they come back online. The drone's scan lines can also be easily countered by the survivors, having them just crouch, which is incredibly funny to watch, whilst also being mildly frustrating when you're trying to go for a 2-tap. I also understand that there is a Skull Merchant rework coming in the future that will probably make Skull Merchant never a trap killer ever again, so this list is probably going to become outdated, but here in 2026, this is the best trap killer available, if you like traps. Now, after explaining what the best trap killer is, I want to explain my process into getting there, just in case anyone was interested. The first step into making this list was to experience them at their worst and at their best. I did this by playing 15 matches of each killer, 5 games with no perks and add-ons, 5 games with no perks, but I can use some add-ons, and then 5 games with a full build. Now, I don't think I can express how terrible trap killers truly are, but here's a taste of everything that went wrong with trap killers. Now, after these horrid matches, I then calculated the win rate of all the killers over the 45 games I played. And what really surprised me was they were all the same at 73% win rate. Now, while I was a bit stunned and confused, I had to look a bit more closely at the results of each section of the games, and which killer performed better in each match. I used metrics like average kills and gens remaining as a metric. Additionally, I had some data from nightlight.gg, which is a great site if you want some recent data, but surprisingly what I found as the best use of data was the DBD stats website. And at first glance it can be a little bit misleading because I have way more hours on Trapper than I do Skull Merchant, and way more hours on Skull Merchant than I do Hag. So to fix this issue, I had to normalize all the data. By basically using hourly to keep the data in line, I was able to calculate the standard deviation of each metric, that being kills per hour, kills per match, hooks per hour, and hooks per match. From the standard deviation, I then calculated something called a z-score, which is a very fancy way of comparing metrics to the average. A higher positive z-score basically means you're performing above the average, whilst a lower z-score means you're performing below the average. And compiling all these results together, I was able to see which killer was actually able to perform above average for the majority of the matches, and then the average result for the next highest killer, and then which killer underperformed on everything. Apologies if this got a little bit too nerdy into the data side of things, but I am hoping to do this for other killers in the future. Possibly range killers, stealth killers, mobility killers, dash killers, you name it. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you would consider subscribing, that would help me out a ton. And I'll see you gamers in the fog.